Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for us to welcome Hayley Campbell and Neil Gaiman to our stage this evening. Hayley Campbell is the author of the beautifully designed new book, The Art of Neil Gaiman, which is an authorized biography of Neil and his work. Neil Gaiman is an author of short fiction, novels, comic books, graphic novels, audio theater, and films. His notable works include the comic book series The Sandman and his novels Stardust and American Gods. He has won numerous awards, including the Hugo, Nebula, and Bram Stoker Awards. He is the first author to win both the Newbery and the Carnegie Medals for the same work on the Graveyard Book. In 2013, The Ocean at the End of the Lane was voted Book of the Year by the British National Book Awards. They are here tonight to discuss Hayley's book, The Art of Neil Gaiman. So without any further ado, please welcome Hayley Campbell and Neil Gaiman.
I love that you get top billing.
Stole it. It was very distracting.
Did we keep talking about other stuff, or did we just sort of stop for...
No, there was a bit where we even wandered off to get dinner and I forgot to turn the tape off. Because I am a professional journalist.
You are, you're writing for BuzzFeed these days.
Yeah.
You know, you don't say that with the enthusiasm where people say you're writing for the New York Times these days. Yes, I'm the New York Times. Whereas more people probably pay attention to BuzzFeed than they do to the New York Times.
Yeah,
that's true. You know, as long as those wacky kittens carry on doing wacky things.
Yeah.
Okay. So, BuzzFeed. The Art of Neil Gaiman.
There might be BuzzFeed people here, I don't even know.
Okay, so what was the weirdest thing that you found out? I mean, you got to go up into the attic,
Yeah.
and which is filled with boxes and tubs filled with things.
The weirdest thing I found out was not entirely Neil related. It was that 80s porn magazines always print interviews with interesting people on the back of the centerfold. Because Neil used to interview people for British porn magazines, and he wouldn't keep the whole porn magazine, he'd just cut out his interviews. So you'd get the bottom half of a lady, a very 80s lady, and nothing else. I don't know what their faces look like. So neither does anyone else. So I learned that you have a very strange niche porn collection in your attic. And also that you mostly don't remember what stuff is. I was always taking stuff down to him in his office going, Neil, why were you drawing and faxing pictures of bunny rabbits to Steve Bissett in the middle of the night? And he'd go, I don't know. Why did you draw a vampire bunny rabbit? No, I don't know why I did that.
Yeah, Steve Bissett and I, before there was the internet, I mean, you talk about discovering the internet, before there was ever the internet, there were fax machines.
Apparently cartoonists were just faxing each other in the middle of the night. Constantly.
There was strange faxing, it was...
It was great. If you've got a fax machine and you know a cartoonist, it's like, get on that. It's really... They don't just say, hi. Oh, I like it best when you were asking someone, could you send me a fax to check if my fax is working? They draw a portrait of themselves going, hi.
It's really strange art. Steve Bissett was very good at using the fax machine. Jill Thompson.
Jill Thompson was amazing. Top-notch fax machine artist. I want those to be collected in a book. They're falling apart and yellowing, but we need to rescue them.
Faxes have a sort of strange... But you must have put some of those faxes in the book.
I think I did. I think there's one where someone is trying to teach you how to draw.
That's Dave McKean.
Dave McKean.
Drew me a whole sort of comic that was drawing lessons for Neil from Dave.
Yeah, it was anatomy for Neil. And then you tried to do a drawing and send it back, and it was actually really good. I'm pretty sure it's in there. Who knows? I have a copy. I don't, it doesn't matter if you guys do.
The strange thing about the book being called The Art of Neil Gaiman, which people would think, this is going to consist entirely of drawings by Neil, something that he's not actually famous for. And rightly not actually famous for.
Someone asked me if it was just the drawings it was like the art in your house that you've collected over the years. And that I had made a collection so that you could cut it out and recreate Neil's house. Why would I do that?
So what is it? Explain what it is.
It's explaining how Neil got this way. And I went right back to childhood pictures. I think there's even your birth certificate in there, so we're proper thorough. And I liked digging around in your late teens, early 20s career because you don't seem to have any idea what you were doing, but you managed it anyway. And so I think there's hope for all of us who are just dicking around and have no idea what we're doing. So that's what I liked best, because no one has really gone back and asked you about just being a journalist. It's just been a kind of footnote to that kind of thing. So it's explaining the whole career and how it happened. But that's the bit that's most interesting to me.
I was fascinated that there were people that you interviewed who, well, people you interviewed who I haven't seen for 30 years, but there are people you interviewed who were out, back there when a 22, 23, 24-year-old Neil, as a very young and very, very hungry journalist, was just sort of building this peculiar career, which basically consisted of, will you give me money to write something? I will write something.
And expertly blagging his way into things is what I learned. Each person said, I don't know why Neil was at that thing. I guess he just came and was there. I liked interviewing your old editor at the porn magazines because he has apparently been waiting about 30 years for someone to ask him about it. He was so excited that he turned up at the pub with a dictaphone, just in case I had forgotten mine, plus also spare batteries for my dictaphone and his. He was so excited, and he loves you to bits. It was adorable.
Ian Campbell.
Yeah, Ian.
It was one of those weird magic things that happen at the start of a career. Ian had been the editor of Knave, which was a softcore 1980s British magazine, which I actually learned more about, was ready to, wanted to retire. The printers did not want to lose their biggest print job, so they bought the magazines. Knave and Fiesta, its twin, and Fiesta was the one that made the money, because it had readers' wives in it. And nobody actually bought Knave. So Ian one day had this sort of strange moment of enlightenment, sort of Zen porn editing, where he realized that nobody read the magazine for the articles.
Only liars.
So why didn't he make the articles good and filled with the kinds of things that he wanted to read, rather than not? And that occurred, that sort of, his road to Damascus moment occurred, I believe, like the day before I phoned him up and said, I want to do interview, I think I just interviewed Robert Silverberg and maybe Douglas Adams for Penthouse. And I went, this is great. I can interview interesting people. And these guys, I'd done some interview with She magazine, which was a very legitimate women's magazine, and they paid me £80 and not published the article. And then I did Robert Silverberg for Penthouse, and they gave me £350 and published the article 3 weeks later. And I went, this is what I want to do. I want to do it for the people who pay me the £350.
Morals.
And that was the moment that Ian Pemble had his Road to Damascus moment, decided to give me, barely knowing me. I mean, you know, I did an interview with him, and then I had this monthly gig for the next 3 years, whatever, of just interviewing anybody I was interested in talking to, basically.
An interview with John Cooper Clarke in a porn magazine. I love that.
That was my first one, I did say. John Cooper Clarke, a Liverpool poet, a punk poet. And I did science fiction authors like Harry Harrison, horror writers like James Herbert.
Monty Python, Terry Jones.
Monty Python's Terry Jones. It was those kind of strange, rather interesting people that people I wanted to talk to. That was the deal, was I needed to want to talk to them. And so I had this very strange venue.
What I liked was how you interviewed people, but you never wasted that connection later. They always turned up later in your career doing stuff. You interviewed Terry Pratchett for stuff.
I did. That was how I met Terry. Terry Pratchett and I met. We had a Chinese meal. I was interviewing him for Space Voyager magazine. And I was 24 and wearing a hat. It was a sort of a Trilby-ish thing.
Was this when you were dressing in all grey?
Yeah, I was grey, and it was a grey hat, and I kind of had this idea when I was 24 that I was the kind of person who wore a hat. And it was a beautiful fantasy.
Are there any pictures? Because I never found any.
I don't know that there are pictures, because that was back in the old days when film cost money. And none of us had any. So there aren't a lot of photos of me. I mean,
I looked
photos,
hard. I tried, everyone. I tried.
Any photos you found from that period are in there, and a lot of them are in Nave, because, you know, photos of Terry Jones pushing my head down. So that's in there. But the hat. In my head, I was a person who wore a hat. In reality, I was a person who left hats in restaurants. Which meant that at 11 o'clock the next morning, I would have had to go back to the restaurant, wherever it was, and knock on the door as they were sort of setting up and saying, did I leave my hat? Oh, thank you. And they'd give me the hat back. And this carried on for about 3 or 4 months, and one day I went, hats in a restaurant, I'm not going back for it. Somewhere it's sitting there still on a shelf like an Indiana Jones box, waiting for me to return for it. In this restaurant in England. They're going, he's got to be back soon.
Was Terry Pratchett wearing a hat at this point?
Terry was wearing a hat, but Terry was not wearing one of his big famous author hats, because he was not a big famous author. He was the press officer for the Southwestern Electricity Board. So he was wearing he was bald, which meant that he liked wearing hats because it kept him warm. And his hat was a small leather, it was kind of like a leather beret. It was not stylish. I don't believe he's worn it since 1985. But I did take some photographs of him that first time. Very, very bad photos, which were then published in Space Voyager because they couldn't afford a photographer. But yeah, I mean, Terry was somebody that I met, I interviewed, we got on. And very soon, my phone would ring. And it would be Terry saying, yeah, what's funnier? And he'd just sort of, whatever he was working on at that point, he would hit a point where he could do one of two things. And he'd say, what's funnier? You know, someone who's brought up by dwarves but is very tall. Or, you know, or somebody who's like a lost king. And I said, well, can't you do both? And he got very used to him phoning up and saying, is it this or that? And me going, but can't you do both? You could do this. And we had the kinds of minds that worked really well together, which was why when it came to doing Good Omens, and I'd written this 5,000 word chunk, which I read the other day for the first time in forever. I pulled out a bunch of, I was writing an article for the BBC, for the Radio Times, about Good Omens, and I actually pulled out the first 5,000 words that I wrote, and discovered things I'd forgotten. We're talking about things being forgotten. I discovered that Crowley's, his name was spelled Crawley, C-R-A-W-L-E-I-G-H in my first draft. And, but anyway, I gave Terry that first 5,000 words and got a phone call from him about 8 months later saying, "Hey, that thing you wrote, are you doing anything with it?" And I said, "No, I'm really busy right now with Sandman." He said, "Well, either sell me the idea or let's write it together." And I said, "Let's write it together." Because that's an awful lot like Michelangelo phoning up and saying, "Yeah, I've got a ceiling job. Do you want to come and do fingers?"
So now that you can see your whole
My entire oeuvre.
Is there anything here that you wish I hadn't put in the book, or that you wish you had changed in your life? That makes me cringe.
The weird and beautiful thing about the book is that there is so much stuff that I'd forgotten, and there's so much stuff that makes me happy. And even the stuff that I find genuinely embarrassing. I find genuinely embarrassing 16-year-old Neil comics.
We put those on BuzzFeed.
You put them on BuzzFeed, yes you did. And I was going, look, they are the kinds of, there's one. It is called Future Legends. And it was all about, I did about 3 of them, I think. And although we only printed one here, which is good.
The other ones are on the internet.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
They mostly involve somebody who looks a bit like a blondish Conan wandering around a deserted post-apocalyptic world in which he lives. He's the only person who's there, and he wanders around being grumpy, and occasionally he accidentally kills anybody who he runs into. But I had failed to notice this was funny. So it was kind of strange. No, I think there are some things in there that you actually publish that, I love this. This is the cover of Ghastly Beyond Belief. And Ghastly Beyond Belief was my first real book. I wrote it with Kim Newman. It was a collection of quotations from film and television and the worst books, and the worst films. And it's only ever been seen looking like that before, which is the actual cover. And that's the original art, and it's published. And things like that just make me really ridiculously happy. And you got the Dave McKean, oh God, that photo's embarrassing. There we go, me and Alice Cooper.
You're just name dropping, that's not embarrassing.
No, it's embarrassing because he's wearing a leather jacket and dark glasses, and I'm wearing a leather jacket and dark glasses. And I have never looked more like his sort of, not even like
I wore a skirt tonight so that we wouldn't be matching. I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't want to come dressed as you.
I wouldn't have minded. I wouldn't have looked at you and gone, "Oh, she's dressed as me, now I can't go up on that stage." Mostly, I think the thing that I thought was strangest and funniest were when you'd find small notes that I'd written.
The small notes were my favourite bit.
And
the beginnings of stories written on the backs of tickets to stuff you obviously weren't paying attention to while you were watching them.
when I needed a piece of paper, I had to write, I had an idea or something, so I would grab anything and write on it. There's an awful lot of stuff on hotel stationery as well.
Hotel stationery and Disneyland tickets.
Anything. So we should probably go over to audience questions, and you will probably have much, much, much more sensible questions than we have of each other. So, what would you like to know?
You'll learn.
Why did you choose him for?
So the question for those who didn't hear it, I want to know the answer
Why
to it.
him?
Why did you choose him for a book?
Because it wasn't my idea. And also, I love you very much.
Tell the story. How did?
I used to work for a publisher called Titan. They're part of Forbidden Planet in the UK. And what happens when you work for a place you don't really like is you dick around on the internal messenger thing for hours. And so I was talking to a guy who also didn't like his job, and then he got another job somewhere else, and his first thing was to decide to do a line of books about big comics guys. So there was an Alan Moore one, and he wanted to do a Neil Gaiman one. And so he suggested me because I'd been sending him emails saying, can I have a job, can I have a job, can I have a job? Also, I've known him forever, and he figured that I would be allowed to dig through all his stuff. And you fell for it.
You're also a really funny, smart writer. I mean, that was, I've been a fan, and, you know, the qualification, it is true to say the qualification for writing that book, or for me saying yes, was not the fact that I'd slept in her bedroom when she was 6. It was actually the fact that I had very rapidly become a fan of, initially, her blogging. She was doing some really funny, sharp, very, very observant writing on her blog. And from there, writing for people, and even in emails, all the writing was just good and sharp and funny. So I wasn't surprised when you actually finally, you know, got to pack in your job in a comic shop and go to work writing stuff for people. But also, it was why I thought, well, you know, it was also a sort of strange inevitability. Somebody's going to write this book, so it may as well be somebody nice and funny who I actually don't mind rummaging around in the attic. Okay, we have a mic. We now have a strolling microphone in the middle. Anybody else with a question? Just there, please.
Are you planning on doing anything else with Dave McKean?
Am I planning on doing anything else with Dave McKean? I'm always planning on doing things with Dave McKean. Right now, we are talking about 2 projects, and both of them are really weird.
Awesome, that's great.
And I'm not sure that I can explain that they're sort of weird new mediary things that may also have a traditional book component, but they're weird. And I'm 3, and I hope I will carry on working with him as long as I can emit words and he can do drawings.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I've seen some of the men that influenced your life that appeared in your novels in different forms. Can you speak about the women who influenced your life? Your different lives, but your one lifetime that appeared in your book. Thank you.
You know, it's really interesting. When I look, it's always very hard for me to say this person appeared in this book, because I rarely actually put people whole into books, and even when I try to, you know, they can be themselves for 2 or 3 sentences, and then they're a character in a book and there's somebody else. Women have influenced me. Some of the biggest ones will be Diana Wynne Jones. Diana died a couple of years ago. She was an author of children's fiction. She was somebody, I read her my first Diana Wynne Jones book when I was about 17, and immediately was angry that she hadn't been writing books when I was 7. It was like, I needed you in my childhood and you were not there. And when I became a young book reviewer, I made a point of aggressively grabbing the Diana Wynne Jones books and going, no, I will be reviewing this. And then I got very excited because she was invited to a convention in Birmingham that I was going to be at, and I got to the bar. I got to the convention a little bit early, just because when my train came in, went to the bar, and there was Diana Wynne Jones, also there slightly early, also in the bar, and I went over to her and I just started telling her how much I loved her books and talking about her work with her. And about 15 years later, she said to me, you know, you were the first adult who was not a children's librarian or a teacher or my publisher to tell me that they liked my books, and I'd never realized that. Probably I was the first adult by half an hour, because then the convention started. Lots of people got to tell me. But you know, I learned so much from her. She was witchy, she was funny, she was brilliant. She wrote in the same kind of peculiar seat-of-the-pants way that I did, where you kind of know what's going to happen, but the whole joy of the writing process is that somewhere along the line something happens that surprises you, because that is what's going to surprise the reader. And she had remarkable integrity. And you know, Diana was a friend for the rest of her life. And you know, I remember sitting by her bed. She was in a hospice and had a few hours left to live. And just sitting there thinking, I've learned so much from you, and I owe so much to you. So she would be one of them.
I was watching Dreams with Sharp Teeth, the documentary about Harlan Ellison, and I was just curious. You ever get really nervous around somebody like Harlan Ellison, worry that he might lash out at you physically?
Do I worry that Harlan Ellison is one day going to throw me down an elevator shaft? No.
If he tried, could you beat him?
Yes. Because he's just had a stroke and he's limping right now. I'm not even sure if he's back on his feet, so I could.
That's like one of those phone calls I would receive at the comic book shop from drunk people in pubs. Who would win between Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk? Different answer every time.
Did you ever see they're fictional? They don't exist.
Drunk people will not accept that answer.
Okay. Just wondering. So, I mean, but I do definitely, when I first met Harlan, I was incredibly intimidated by him. I remember my phone. I met him once in like 1985, and then one day I'd written a Batman story, Secret Origins of Batman Villains. I'd written a framing story, and I'd had Batman break the law in it technically because he turned up in somebody's hotel room. And, you know, the guy wakes up and there's Batman standing by the bed saying, you know, this investigation that you're doing is not going to end well. Which I figured, you know, Batman, he's forever breaking into places and foiling things and stuff. But Harlan decided to ring me up and yell at me because he felt that Batman should not be depicted breaking the law. And he yelled, and there was so much yellage. By the end of it, I was just like, I'm really sorry. And I think he realized that he'd gone sort of over the top, so he then started apologizing and being incredibly nice, and has actually been incredibly nice to me pretty much ever since, except the one time that I told a journalist who called me up and said, I want to interview Harlan Ellison, can you give me his, but actually I will back up here. So what happened is the phone, I got home one day and my answering machine, the red light is blinking evilly. And I press the button and a voice says, Gaiman, it's Ellison. I am gonna fucking kill you. I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna kill your children, I will kill your farm animals. I am going to nuke your fucking house, and I am going to sow salt where the nuclear glowing remains of your house once was, and nothing will ever grow there again. Call me. So I call him. I say, hello, Harlan? Why did you give a journalist my phone number? I said, I didn't. This journalist phoned me up. He said, can you put me in touch with Harlan Ellison? And I said, no, I can't. He said, well, can you at least give me his phone number? I said, no, but he's in the phone book. And Harlan went, oh, well, that's okay then. So, yeah, I don't glow in the dark, and Harlan is still in the phone book. Okay, we probably have time for one, maybe two short questions. Yes?
How was the relationship with Todd McFarlane when you did Spawn, and how much involvement did you have with Angela being moved from Image to Marvel?
Well, my relationship with Todd when I did Spawn was very good. It deteriorated after a while because Todd decided that he owned all the stuff that I created for him, and I said, no, technically I don't actually. There's copyright laws and things on my side, and he said, if you think that, I am a rich publisher, you are just an author, I will see you in court. And so I saw him in court. And the jury went, no, actually, Neil actually does actually all that things. So it was a very strange, very long legal case. It was only long because Todd declared bankruptcy instead of paying me. And then, so I had to then wait about 8 or 9 years when he came out of bankruptcy. And then he basically settled, and part of the settlement was I gave him the characters like Medieval Spawn and Cogliostro that I created that seemed better part of the Spawn universe, and he gave me Angela. And then I sort of went, well, now I have this comic character that I don't really know what to do with. So she went over to Marvel, where she's having a whale of a time, and is becoming part of the Marvel universe in lots of interesting ways. And every now and again I will get a call or from, Brian Bendis, or go and have lunch or something with Joe Quesada, and they'll fill me in on what they're thinking. And then I'll say, well, that sounds great, could you do this and that? And they'll go, oh my God, that's brilliant. So I'm definitely not outside of the Angela family, but I'm sort of feeling very, very like an uncle or something now. I get to have, I'm involved, but other people are raising her.
Excellent. Thank you.
So, you're welcome. Okay, last question, we're still doing.
Neil, when it comes down to your properties being translated over to film, I have one in mind, Coraline. The book, obviously, and the movie, different pacing, different way it's turned out. For your own interest, your own amusement, which one do you actually like better? How you wrote it, or how they adapted it to film?
I always like the one that I always like the one that I wrote better, because that's the thing that's closer to the thing that I had in my head. But that's also what I wrote. There's the few times that I've actually written things to be filmed. I like The Doctor's Wife better than I like the script of The Doctor's Wife, because The Doctor's Wife was the thing that the script was made for and meant to be. With something like Coraline, I love what Henry Selick did. I think, you know, some of his choices wouldn't have been my choices. A lot of his choices wouldn't have been my choices. But that's because my choices are the way that I did it in the book. But I love what he did. I think Henry is a craftsman and a genius. And his first draft script was incredibly close to Coraline the book. And I was the one who said, you know, it doesn't really work. You're gonna have to open it up and make it more of a movie. And about a year later, a script arrived, and now it had YB and all those other elements in. And some of them I liked and some of them I didn't, but I felt like it read like a movie script now. It didn't read like just a rehash of the book.
I liked it because I got to meet Henry Selick, and I realized that he looks like he animated himself. He's a tall, spindly man, and when I met him, he was wearing a pinstripe suit. And when I'm 6'1", but he's, what is he, like 15 feet tall? And when he leaned down to shake my hand, it was like,
he is Jack Skellington.
he is.
I mean, it is the
He smiles like Jack Skellington.
It is the weird tragedy of his career that you know, he spent so many years of his life building and making The Nightmare Before Christmas, and 2 weeks before it came out, it was retitled Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. And that means that nobody actually knows that Henry directed it, built it from the ground up, did the whole thing.
And put himself in it.
And put himself, well, he is Jack Skellington. And you'll talk to him, and his arms will do these weird while you're talking to him. And it's so, and you go, I thought that was just something that, you know, an animated character did, but no, and it's something he does when he's not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
And he'll do it when he's thinking, you know.
I think he has to animate the think.
Amanda teases me a lot because she points out that I talk with my hands sometimes, and that if I actually are forced to sit on my hands.
Shall I do the hands for you? You do it with that.
Yeah. And she'll go, and she's actually got the things that I do with my hands down to a whole set of things. And she'll go, do you know that there are some conversations where you start tossing an invisible ball in? But Henry is worse. Well,
yes,
in his own way. So, yeah, Hayley Campbell.
Neil Gaiman.